President Trump surprised a lot of people on Friday when he commuted the sentence of former Congressman George Santos. Santos was 3 months into a 7-year sentence for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Here with me now is former Congressman George Santos. Thank you so much for being here. First, tell us about the conversation that you had with President Trump after he commuted your sentence.
Thank you for having me, Dana. So, look, as far as having the conversation and its nature, I'll just leave it at the president was very kind, and it was a humbling experience to have the privilege of speaking to a sitting president of the United States. Where I come from, that's just not something that happens, and it's not normal for my family and I. So I'll leave the contents of the conversation private.
It's also not normal for a president to commute the sentence of somebody like you who pled guilty to the crimes that you did. So were you surprised that this happened? Did you expect the commutation?
I had no expectations. I wasn't even aware until I learned it off of the chyron of mainstream media inside of the prison myself. I had just been released from segregated isolation after 41 days for absolute no valid reason other than a retaliatory warden.
So
but
sorry,
I learned it from the TV.
Yeah, so I mean, that's incredible. You were standing in prison. You looked up at television, and that's where you saw that your sentence was commuted?
More like I didn't see it. Other inmates saw it and called me over to see it. I was not in the room at the time, and then I made my way to see it. I called my family, and they told me it had happened, but I was not aware. It was a surprise.
I want to just read to you something that your fellow New York Republican, the Congressman Nick LaLota, tweeted after he saw that your sentence was commuted. He said, George Santos didn't merely lie, he stole millions, defrauded an election, and his crimes, for which he pled guilty, warrant more than a 3-month sentence. He should devote the rest of his life to demonstrating remorse and making restitution to those he wronged. Another New York Republican, Congressman Andrew Garbarino, who is part of the ethics committee, at least he was when they were investigating you, said your victims haven't been made whole and that, quote, he has shown no remorse. The less than 3 months that he spent in prison is not justice. What's your response?
Look, they're entitled to their opinion. Look, Dana, this isn't about tit for tat. It's not about revenge. It's not about retribution. It's obvious they are my critics, and they have the right to do that. And they have the right to say whatever they're saying. I'm not going to sit here and go on my former colleagues, LaLota and Garbarino. It's just, that's not what it's about. For me, I'm looking at this very simply, Dana. I'm going to look to the future. I've learned a great deal and a very large slice of humble pie, if not the entire pie, for the experience I had at FCI Ferreton under the care of Warden Kelly. But I will say that this isn't about that. I don't want to rehash and go into these things. Life is too short. I have been granted a second chance. I have made a very concise decision to apply that for good and use that to make amends with my community, with my friends, with my family, and those who I have left a sour taste in their mouth. And hopefully one day get my critics to at least appreciate that I've turned around and done better with my life. This isn't about, glitter, stars, and glam or going back to Congress. So it's really not. This is a very personal journey and road for me ahead. It is not going to be easy. I am still a felon. I still wear the scorn of my poor choices and my poor decisions, and I have to fight that myself. Now, if you want to talk about my sentence, look, I argue there were three defendants in my case, myself, my treasurer, and a former staffer. My treasurer gets a 3-year probation sentence, which is appropriate for a first-time nonviolent white-collar crime. I get a 7-year disproportionate sentence that is anything but political if you talk to anybody who really looks at these kind of cases. And then you look at my staffer, who's still sitting in FCI Ferreton, which is Sam Mealy, unfairly. So you really need to take this and see what's equitable here. So I still think for it to be equitable, Sam Mealy should have a commutation afforded to him. And I think that probation would have been the appropriate sentence from the get. Restitution, probation. And now I don't make those decisions. I'm very grateful to President Trump, Dana. And I sit here quite literally. I don't know how much more humbled I can get before people believe I'm humble or remorseful, but I can just do the best in my actions moving forward.
You were ordered by the court to pay $370,000 in restitution to the people you defrauded. Will you still pay that back?
Well, if you really say the people, I just want to be clear with your audience so that we're not misleading them. 85% of that really goes into the investment made into my campaign for polling and TV ads and literature by the National Republican Congressional Committee. The investment was made to win a race. I won that race. There was no fraud there. This is a case we argued with the prosecution, but they needed to inflate the numbers in order to make it a more appealing case for them in federal court, instead of just going after the mishandling of finances, which, by the way, most members of Congress currently who are still serving in both parties who ever have had issues with FEC filings, they pay fines. Nobody actually goes to prison. So it's inequitable in its nature.
Well, this has said now a couple of times that you feel remorse and you are humbled. What will that look like in actual terms and the way that you live your life?
You know, I learned a lot. I met a lot of interesting people. Prison is a place where it's the great equalizer, quite literally. It doesn't matter. I was incarcerated with a billionaire, and I was incarcerated with people who were homeless. And it's a great equalizer, and it's very sobering. And you hear the stories, and, you know, we're just human beings. We go through different walks of life, and we have trouble. And the reality really comes down to, how can I help rehabilitate people? How can I be a voice of helping change a system that needs desperate changing to help rehabilitation? Prison is not rehabilitating anybody. It's actually creating recidivism because it's not doing what it's supposed to do. I'd love it. I told this to the president, that I'd love to be involved with prison reform, and not in a partisan way, in a real human way, in a way that we affect it, that it helps society, it helps these individuals rebuild their lives, and we have a better system with less incarcerated people. America today has 250,000 federal inmates approximately, and I think it would be much nicer to look at reducing that number. And if I can be a part of helping that, I think that would be a great road to follow in the future.
When he announced your commutation, President Trump praised you for having, quote, the courage, conviction, and intelligence to always vote Republican. There are a lot of people who are really unhappy about your commutation, because they see it as President Trump giving favorable treatment to you because you're a loyal ally of his.
You know what? I say this, and I hate that we have to go down this road. And then there's a lot of people who were upset with President Biden who pardoned his entire family before he left office in an unprecedented move. So pardon me if I'm not paying too much attention to the curl clutching of the outrage of my critics and of the people predominantly on the left who are going to go out there and try to make a big deal out of something like this. It is known that presidents have the power of the pardon and the clemency, which are plenary, and they're extended at their will. President Biden pardoned his son after he said he wouldn't. I didn't see outrage. I mean, some of your colleagues,
there was
to
some
their
outrage.
credit, there was some outrage because there was a lot of people literally licking their wounds because they had said, you see, he's magnanimous and he's not going to do it. He's all about the right thing. So he lied. So I'm not going to debate this, but I'm going to say, look, there's always going to be critics. People are going to like me. People are going to hate me. It doesn't matter whoever gets clemency in the future or whoever that person might be. I'm pretty confident if President Trump had pardoned Jesus Christ off the cross, he would have had critics. So that's just the reality of our country.
All right, I'm going to skip over that analogy and just ask you lastly before I let you go. Some of the critics I was talking about, as you know, and I gave you some quotes, are your fellow Republicans. Before there was a conviction, you were kicked out of Congress in a pretty big bipartisan vote. What is your message to your former colleagues now that you are out of prison and you are talking about being humble and having remorse?
Let's work for the people. I understand. I was in a chaotic ball of flame 2 years ago. I was my own worst enemy. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the American people. I'm sorry to the people of the 3rd Congressional District of New York. I'm sorry to the leadership of the Republican Party who invested their time in me. My chairman in Nassau County, my former chairman in Suffolk County, my chairman in Queens County, my chairman in New York State, along with the voters. I'm sorry. I genuinely am sorry. And to my colleagues who I forced their hands, quite literally, in my own doing, I'm sorry I put you through that. And I do hope that you all continue to work and continue to deliver for the American people, because at the end of the day, this country's worth fighting. It doesn't matter if you go it from the left or from the right. Let's just try to meet in the middle, find out common ground, and let's just deliver a great America full of prosperity for everyone in this country.
Any future runs right now?
Not. I'm 37 years old. I can tell you this. Not that I can see of in the next decade. I'm all politicked out.
All right, buckle up. Because George Santos is back in the spotlight, and this time it's post-prison, post-Trump, and full of drama. In his first public interview since Donald Trump commuted his sentence, Santos sat down with CNN's Dana Bash. And let's just say it was part confession, part deflection, and part, well, George being George. If you thought Santos was going to lay low after being released, think again. He's doubling down, throwing punches, and even comparing his situation to Jesus. Yes, that Jesus. Let's break this down. Santos appears on CNN's State of the Union just 2 days after Trump commuted his 7-year sentence for wire fraud and identity theft. Santos touched on his future plans, his political ambitions, and made some claims about why he believes he's still a credible figure in politics despite all the controversy. The interviewer pressed him on serious points: the prison sentence, allegations of fraud, and the commutation itself. But Santos navigated each question with a mix of deflection, charm, and selective honesty. This interview isn't just about Santos. It reflects on the decision to commute his sentence. Supporters see redemption. Critics see favoritism and political gamesmanship. It's a flashpoint for the bigger debate about power, privilege, and justice in America. Okay, here's my take, and I want you to weigh in too. First off, Santos has clearly tried to rebrand himself as a misunderstood martyr. The Jesus comparison? Wild. But it tells you everything about how he sees himself. Not as someone who made mistakes, but as someone persecuted for them. Second, the "I'll pay restitution if the law makes me" line? That's not accountability. That's legal minimalism. It's like saying, "I'll clean my room if the cops show up." It's technically compliant, but morally hollow. And the Trump angle, this is where it gets spicy. Trump called Santos a rogue and praised his loyalty to the GOP. Santos is leaning into that, framing the commutation as a reward for political allegiance. That's not just controversial, it's a signal. Loyalty over legality. But here's the thing. Santos isn't just defending himself. He's testing the waters. He wants to see if America is ready to forgive, forget, and maybe even re-elect. So let's open this up. Do you think Santos deserves a second chance? Is Trump's commutation a political favor or a fair act of clemency? And what does this say about how we treat public figures who break the law? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are you outraged, intrigued, or just entertained? I want to hear it all.